Welcome back to Rated Radio with your hosts, Rayburn Alexander and Shane Wyndham. Shane, what's going on in your world?
I mean, not much. I'm really excited to get into this. I don't know why, but I had a lot of fun with the soundtracks thing.
This is something that we've talked about doing for quite a while, correct?
Yeah. Spotify's soundtracks are a bit of a shit show.
Yep.
You can find playlists that are weird or incomplete or have the wrong versions of the songs. There's a lot going on. So what we've done is kind of a mishmash just for soundtracks that we really like and really enjoy. But before we get into all that, let's talk about Billboard's #1 song this week. It was also their #1 song last week. It's called Driver's License by Olivia Rodrigo. This is an artist I hadn't heard of until this listen. Restored a bit of my faith in the general public's taste. How'd you feel about this song?
I actually really enjoyed this. I think at times it's dreamy. I like that it's got that sensation of floating in water. I really liked it. If I'm rating it, I probably would have given this song a 5.
Yeah, it's a love song in line with the current pop trends. It has a fairly basic through line with regard to the piano melody, but it does evolve into something a bit more musically interesting than a lot of tracks like this. The lyrics are going to cut most anyone the way music is meant to, and I really enjoy her voice. Pretty reminiscent of Birdie or Maria Mina. This one is a very solid 5 for me, for sure.
Yeah, when she's talking about the red lights, that whole part is just, it's so good.
Yeah, the lyrics are fantastic here.
Yeah, so.
Much more of a mood than Mood was.
For sure. So, all right. Well, getting on to our list for this sound.
Hey. First,
whoa.
we it's still a show, Rayburn. We still got to roll that intro.
All right, let's roll the intro.
I hope my playfulness is coming across.
It's coming across. I was going to say, I'm sorry for my carelessness when it came to the special.
Don't need apologies. Our list was favorite songs from great soundtracks. We had all sorts of ideas for what we could use for a list, but it's a giant mess, so we just used it as an opportunity, right?
Yeah, I had to fight the urge to not create my own soundtrack playlists so that someone out there has a better representation of what is supposed to be included on the soundtracks. Because, a lot of these were a mess.
You want to start us off?
Yeah, I sure do. Starting off my list of top 10 more songs from great soundtracks, I went with Son of a Preacher Man by Dusty Springfield. This is from Pulp Fiction. There are tons of good songs on Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction soundtrack, but this one, every time I hear it, I think back of John Travolta, Vincent Vega, walking around Mia Wallace's house and looking confused as fuck. So, yeah, that's why it makes my list.
Cool.
What about you?
You've seen my list already, right? So...
I have. So it's not really a surprise.
Okay.
But for listeners' sake, I'm just going to pretend that I'm still surprised.
I only sent you that to maybe alleviate overlap. I'm not worried about it for the special, but I mostly just didn't want to hear a bunch of unprepared bullshit about my picks. And
I've already gone through and listened to all of them. I did my due diligence there.
Well, let's start off then. First pick is Darlin' by Bambi Lee Savage from the Sling Blade soundtrack. I've always loved this movie because it afforded more humanity to people with mental disabilities than I was used to seeing in the world. It's far more realistic here. The relationship Carl has with Frank wasn't something built on the notion of Frank needing some sort of pet, which is the typical portrayal you're apt to find when it comes to mental disability, but something built to attack the way we age our misconceptions into discriminatory behavior. It's a beautiful film for those who haven't seen it, and the soundtrack stands out in my head because my middle school theater troupe used it for the stage play we put on about the first child in the U.S. to die of AIDS. I picked Darlin' because it's one of the few non-instrumental tracks and reminds me of the romantic aside present in Sling Blade. Definitely a preamble to my love of the show, Love on the Spectrum.
Which I still have not watched yet.
My God. Why do people not listen to me about this? Turn that shit on.
If I listen, I'm not saying that I will never watch it, but if I listen to everything that everyone recommends to me, I wouldn't even have time to do this podcast. And you know that's true.
Well, the nice thing is a lot of my recommendations, given I do have personal taste, but I take the things that people recommend and I try to go through them and filter out what's really good from what's not, so great.
Okay.
Love on the Spectrum is... What's your next pick?
Next pick for me is Hold Me Now by the Thompson Twins. This is from the Wedding Singer soundtrack. I was tempted to choose the Wedding Singer soundtrack when it came to making my selections for albums to cover during the special, but I settled for it and ending up here. This song by the Thompson Twin is, oh my God, fuck me.
You ever seen Metalocalypse, the show?
Yes.
There's I want to say it's Toki, their rhythm guitarist who puts S's on the ends of everything.
Is that what I was doing?
I wants to goes to the grocery stores. Yes, it's greatness. By the way, I never even considered I made this big ass list of things to like soundtracks. Mm-hmm. The Wedding Singer never popped into my head. Mm-hmm. And it's a good one.
It made remember how I told you I whittled it down to 11 soundtracks?
Mm-hmm.
This made the 11. So, yeah, it holds a good place here because Hold Me Now by the Thompson Twins, and that's not Thompson's Twins, the Thompson's Twins.
The Thompson's Twins.
Hold Me Now by the Thompson Twins is just such a good 80s, like, new wave song without being too weird.
Holds me now.
Holds me now. Oh.
Yeah.
It's a good song.
It is.
Moving on to your next pick.
Is Brand New Key by Melanie. The song was featured in Boogie Nights. Not only is the music in Boogie Nights stupendous, but the film also goes out of its way to incorporate the music into what you're seeing on screen at times. This track's a good example of what I mean. My grandmother was in the room the first time I saw this film.
Oh.
Yes. This film, which has roots in the porn industry.
Mm-hmm.
This left me thinking the film was far funnier than it actually is. Like some kid in school hearing a joke that's not that funny, but you're dying inside because all you want to do is laugh during the quiet time. She looked so offended the entire time this thing was going, but she never got up and left the room. That's definitely a memorable moment in time for me.
Without incriminating myself too much, my only comment regarding her sitting through Boogie Nights. Yeah, she's had some, oh God, how would I say this?
Why don't you just go ahead and say what you want to say? Grandma found porn and she watched the whole shit and then commenced to call people critiquing whatever this random porn was that she had.
It was just dicks. And then she made the comment, God, she's going to kill us. She made the comment a couple weeks back about how she just can't quit looking at men's penises in their shorts. And I, like, the fact that she didn't leave during Boogie Nights does not surprise me whatsoever, especially because of the recent things that I have found out. She's gonna fucking murder us.
Holy shit. She's never gonna hear this. You have to pay to hear this.
That's true.
That's
true.
Go.
She'll never hear it. Yes. Okay. I feel a little bit better.
What's your next pick?
Next on my list is Army of Me by Bjork from the Sucker Punch soundtrack. A lot of the songs on the Sucker Punch soundtrack feature Emily Browning. She stars in the movie. Emily Browning will always remind me of your younger sister Jordan, especially especially in the movie Sucker Punch. Might be because her hair's so light. But
I could see that.
yeah. But this movie soundtrack holds a lot of different covers. Creepier version of Sweet Dreams. Army of Me by Bjork is one of those that they decided to not cover or touch. And it is just fine on its own. So
it is a different version. It's a wild ass version that they've got on the soundtrack.
It's so good though. Oh my God. It's so good.
That film, it got some hate when it came out. I don't know what people were expecting going into that, but it looked like it was going to be not a lot of plot, a lot of artful action set to music, and it just, I loved that experience.
Yeah, I completely disagree with the initial critical reception. I love and still love this movie. Not only is it visually gorgeous, the fight scenes are well manufactured, and the kind of story within a story is a brilliant concept. So
I actually use a scene from this film in one of my YouTube videos. I'm going to put it on mentions. Sorry, it just popped into my head.
Everyone should see this movie. So anyway, moving on to your next pick.
If I Could Turn Back Time by Cher from
Deadpool 2.
Yeah. I wanted to avoid the inception of superhero films here, but Deadpool 2 has such a fantastic soundtrack. The song itself makes me think of driving to and from Lake Ray Roberts as a kid. Shit like this was always on the radio at the time. Almost everyone drove around with the windows down back then, and there was something magical about being a kid in the back seat, enjoying the breeze without any worry of responsibilities. And even though I was a kid who did know enough to appreciate that stint of easy living while it lasted, there's still some irony here in remembering a song about wanting to turn back time while thinking about how I'd sometimes like to turn back time.
Back time.
Yeah, big thanks to all the adults who made my childhood amazing. What you got next?
Next on my list is The Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel from the Graduate soundtrack. I have talked about the Graduate soundtrack in the past, so it would only make sense that in a special where we would talk about soundtracks that it would make my list. I ultimately decided not to go with Scarborough Fair because it made another list, but chose not to go completely basic and choose Mrs. Robinson either.
No, sorry.
What?
I didn't know you were reading. I thought you were just talking.
I was just talking.
Oh.
Did it sound like I was reading?
Yeah, it sounded like I straight interrupted.
No,
Okay.
I was just talking. What's up?
Is that a movie you really enjoy a lot, or is it just the soundtrack for you?
I like the movie.
Okay. You bring it up a lot, so I didn't know.
No, I really like the movie, but I didn't discover the movie until I was an adult because I was an idiot and hadn't developed a patience for older movies that were, I guess, had the grainy resolution and, just poorer quality of movies. I was an idiot. So I avoided The Graduate for a while, but then as I got older, I developed a new appreciation for it. And in a way, which it's not funny, but I find it funny.
I can see what you mean. I think we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
But I definitely think it's a interesting thing. It really makes me wonder. I know it happens all the time that older women are looking for younger men. Mm-hmm. But we were talking about it in a different episode, how young men aren't the smartest. They don't know how to break away from something that's not working. They get pretty obsessive. Mm-hmm. Why you would want that as an older person who's already gone through the motions?
I don't know. And
maybe that young dick is just that good to some people. That's another thing. Young people, especially people who are inexperienced, they can't be fucking really well,
I think she was just bored. If you watch the movie, she seems like her life is very boring. But a lot of people think that the end of that movie ends on a happy note. I don't know if the general consensus realizes that their smiles fade and they're unsure of the decisions that they just made, which ultimately will affect them and their families for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And they say that Kramer versus Kramer was based off of the end of The Graduate. Doesn't star the same woman, but they both have Dustin Hoffman in it. And there's a rumor out there saying that Kramer versus Kramer ultimately is what happened after The Graduate
Okay.
ended.
Well, I'll have to give that a shot then. I guess most people want a happy ending. So if the ending is kind of ambiguous, even if it looks like, you're a couple and you're going to struggle no matter what. So maybe that's just them realizing there's going to be struggle. Who knows?
Who knows? This is not a special on The Graduate. So
I wondered if you liked the movie. I don't know.
I do.
Thought it was all right. Stranglehold by Ted Nugent from Dazed and Confused. If you don't love this film and its soundtrack, we probably aren't meant to know each other. Full stop. This is another one of those things that continues influencing my writing style. Why settle for one storyline when you can have a lot of them? This track reminds me of all that partying I did around the age of 21. I remember going to some event in the country, drinking trash can punch, making out with someone I'd just met, and ending up walking around some abandoned peanut factory in the middle of the night. Certainly felt like that moon tower scene from Dazed and Confused. Like if you don't relate to different parts of that movie and associate it with your own life, even if it's just one character in the film, like I don't know that we're on the same planet.
I love that you literally went to an actual peanut factory.
I didn't even know that peanut factories were a thing. And we were like in the dark climbing around in the rafters of it was so strange.
That sounds really, really fun, though.
It
Probably
was.
illegal as shit, but...
It really was.
The most I ever did was sneak into a Presbyterian church.
Man.
They left the door unlocked. Your sisters were there.
Well, of course they were.
Anyway. Next on my list is Night Call by Kavinsky, featuring Love Fox. This is from the Drive soundtrack. If you're wanting some of that indie 80s synth, almost reminiscent of the Tron soundtrack, you're going to enjoy what the Drive soundtrack has to offer. I could have gone with another pick by Electric Youth called Under Your Spell. That is also very good. But ultimately, for the 80s synth sounds, I went with Night Call. So, good movie, too. Ryan Gosling doesn't say, hardly anything.
I was going to say, it's very dry. I saw it once and thought it was extremely solid. The music definitely stands out.
What's next for you?
The Perfect Drug by 9 Inch Nails from the Lost Highway soundtrack. I've never seen this film. I just know the soundtrack is a great experience if you're looking for something in the way of industrial or gothic metal. Full disclosure, I bought the soundtrack because the song I by Smashing Pumpkins was not available on any of their other albums. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I bought this and wound up going down the rabbit hole. The Rammstein tracks are nuts. One of my exes used to sing the very end of The Perfect Drug to me after we'd fight. Like the very last few lines of the song, she just used to sing to me when I was upset and broken because we'd been fighting. It's an endearing memory, but I sometimes got the feeling that she liked to fight. That, fighting kept things interesting or made us stronger. Yeah. And I know there are people out there who think makeup sex is great and all, but I've always hated that mentality. It's like if the height of what we can do for each other emotionally comes from wounding one another, maybe we're just not meant to be. Anyway, good song.
Yeah. That leads into my next question regarding our picks. Have you seen that?
No, from our main versus thing this week?
Yes.
I have only seen half, 3 of the 6. My plan initially was to remedy that and watch them all, but almost none of them are streaming, and the ones that I haven't seen are expensive. So,
to toot my own horn, I had not only seen 2 of the main picks that we decided to cover, and I remedied that this week. So I have a good gauge for what these soundtracks were used for all of these movies. I recognize that just listening to them could take them out of context and the overall feel of a movie. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do it. And I was just curious. You didn't have to do it, but I was just curious if you actually had time to.
My plan was, and I think I could have made the time, I just didn't want to spend the money. It's really all it came down to.
Moving on to my picks for this soundtrack special.
Are you in a hurry?
No.
Okay. Just making sure. You sound kind of rushed. Continue.
Okay. No, I'm not.
Okay.
My first pick was Valley Girl from 1983. This was my middle pick.
This was my top pick.
I gave it 10 5s.
I gave it 20 3 5s.
Wow.
That's a double disc album.
Holy shit.
So
it
close.
was one off.
Yeah.
Anyway, my top track from this soundtrack is Eyes of a Stranger by the Payolas.
I liked that one a lot, but my top track, I would have said any of the Plimsolls tracks.
Like a million miles away.
Yeah. There are 3 of them, I think, in total on the soundtrack.
Yeah. Which I think they make an appearance in the movie, if I'm not mistaken.
I think they're actually on stage in the film.
Yeah.
I don't know much about the band, but I would guess, since the other artist that's got 3 tracks here, she's actually on stage.
Yes, she is. And man, is it a bummer that you can't find some of her songs on Spotify. Like my favorite one that's a little controversial, you can't actually listen to on Spotify. You have to go and find it somewhere else.
It's on Spotify.
It wasn't on, I couldn't find it when I looked, but it's a good thing that I know that song so well.
I found it.
Okay. Well, you're fucking special.
Megan watched this movie with me this week. It's there were 2 films that I watched after listening to the soundtrack because I just wanted to go see them again. The soundtracks are that fucking good. Mm-hmm. This was one of them. She'd never seen it, and she loved it.
It's so good.
But
did it create a slight attraction to Nicolas Cage?
Not that I know
of. Or is that
of,
just
no.
me? Oh, okay.
But we were definitely talking about the Johnny Are You Queer track.
Yes.
And I really don't think it's that offensive. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty, I realized in the song, it's almost meant to be poking fun at someone like, hey, why don't you like me? You must be queer. But when you just listen to the lyrics or see it, it's more like a genuine question that you could ask somebody. Like, is that why you're not into me? Is it because, you like males? But
the only reason,
in the film where they do the, like the backup dancers are doing like the limp wrist thing.
Yes.
Oh, that's totally, yeah.
Yes.
That's not PC.
The only reason why I thought it could be offensive is, number one, I associate their movements in the movie with the song. And I don't know what is politically correct anymore. I don't think the term queer is thrown around as much anymore. And I don't know that it's frowned upon to be used.
Isn't that what the Q stands for in LGBTQ?
I don't know. And I should know that. One
thing I will say is, in addition to watching the original, I made the mistake of trying to watch the remake.
No,
which
Shane
was, let's get this out there because people could go down the wrong path. You are looking for the film from the 80s. I think it's 83, right?
Yes. Yes, 83, starring a young Nicolas Cage.
It's not a musical film. It's not a musical. It doesn't have people, but there's music throughout that film.
Yes, and it's a big factor in the film. The
remake takes the original concept and mixes a musical with High School Musical and much more, of the pop 80s stuff. And it just, I had so much trouble with it. It's not that it's horrible in the end. It just, that first 5 minutes, that will turn you the fuck off.
The little bit that I saw of the remake, it was like someone who had no idea what the 80s were really like and just went based off of what Party City tells them the 80s were like, with all of the most popular 80s music, not the authentic shit, like actual music from that time that wasn't on Billboard's Top 100. The remake was so fake. They took the story, played it to a younger generation, and was like, oh, the 80s were about everything neon and leg warmers. And that's bullshit. That's not what it was about. And they didn't even take the majority of the good music from the original soundtrack and add it to the newer version.
Yeah.
It was pretty
song universally cringe.
Yeah, the main song from the new one was Our Lips Are Sealed by the Go-Go's. That didn't even make an appearance in the first Valley Girl. If you really wanted to pick a song that was like the highlight or the classic choice from the original Valley Girl soundtrack, it would have been I'll Stop the World and Melt With You, which is the last song of the movie.
Yeah, and they do actually use that.
Use it in the trailer.
Yeah, I know.
You
I get it. I get it completely. And like I said, it did get better as it went on. It just never got great. And Anyway, what was your bottom track?
My bottom track was I Eat Cannibals by Toto Coelho.
It's the very last song, right?
Yeah, I just thought it was really, really odd.
Man, I love it.
Odd for me.
I don't know, it caught me, but the one that didn't, the song that I gave the 4 to is something that felt like a 5. I couldn't go all the way there. It has an off-putting vibe. I wouldn't listen to it out of context. It's the track really saying something. It's the next to last track. I think the one by the Bangles.
Oh, okay. So I was going to say, I gave that one a 2 also, so don't feel too bad.
The single disc version of Valley Girl has a few differences between song picks, and that's also very good, though. There's so much music in this film, and it's all really good.
What I want to say about the album is it's a love letter to new wave music of the 80s. A lot of techno, rock, and pop, as well as new wave driven. A lot of solid songs came from this soundtrack, artists that you don't typically hear on the Billboard Top 100 of the time, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It almost got a perfect rating from me. Think Empire Records of the 80s, and this gets you close. The new wave meets punk sensibilities are more my speed than, say, something like Guardians of the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. It's fun in places without leaving me feeling like someone's blowing sunshine up my ass. The music definitely makes this film a standout. One track too many, and wish they'd spread out the Josie Cotton tracks.
Yeah.
Perfection otherwise. Absolute perfection.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think that they reserved those for the end of the soundtrack just because they fall at the end of the movie.
Yeah. I wondered about that.
Mm-hmm.
This is a fantastic, fantastic listening experience. Great movie.
Agreed. If I didn't think so, it wouldn't have made my list.
Exactly. What you got next?
Next is the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 soundtrack from 2014. This was my top soundtrack album.
This was my middle pick.
I gave it 9 5s.
10 5s.
My top track is Fooled Around and Fell in Love by Elvin Bishop.
Escape, the Pina Colada song.
Yeah, and my bottom track was Spirit in the Sky by Norman Greenbaum.
Same.
It's overplayed.
Yeah, not a bad song. It does have some religious overtones that don't really speak to me.
I mean, if it's a war movie in the 70s or it's some sort of funeral or something, it's always Spirit in the Sky, and just be a little bit more creative.
I think the best way to find this, by the way, is to look up Awesome Mix.
Yeah.
Right? It's volume 1.
Yeah, because there is a volume 2 out there, which I considered choosing the Guardians of the Galaxy 2 movie instead, but I decided to go with the original movie that sort of sparked my love for 70s rock and folk. This is an ode to the 60s and 70s. It's almost like opening a time capsule. So it's just something that the soundtrack that I had always wanted from a Marvel movie. I got that with Guardians of the Galaxy. So I was really appreciative when they took the extra mile to add really, really great music. And they've continued to do that with all of the Marvel movies set in space. Same as Thor Ragnarok. I loved what they did with that as well.
That was a goddamn good movie.
Yeah. And the fact that in Thor Ragnarok, they were able to somehow convince Led Zeppelin to let them use the Immigrant Song, which, if you don't know, Zeppelin does not let anyone use their music. Oh, so awesome.
Well, getting back to the Awesome Mix, while the 70s aren't my favorite era of music, I think this is a pretty great mashup of some winners from that era. The disc has some odd moments, is a bit too bright for my liking, and I feel like I could make a better mix myself. Go All the Way is a great song. It just sounds like shit. The recording sounds like shit, man.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe it's just the headphones that I'm listening in, but it's a super solid soundtrack, though. I actually wish it was longer.
Yep. There's also lists of Volume 1 and 2 on Spotify, and it's just Volume 2 is more of what Volume 1 didn't offer.
Yeah.
I've even used Volume 1 and 2 as a jumping off point for my own Awesome Mix, and I have added songs to my Awesome Mix that fit the feel, and I will probably make that public on Spotify if anyone wants to take a look at it. Moving on to our next soundtrack that we covered. It's from the Baby Driver film from 2017. This was my bottom pick.
Same.
I gave it 9 5s.
11.
My top track is Baby Driver by Simon and Garfunkel.
Every Little Bit Hurts.
And my bottom track was Egyptian Reggae by Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers.
I went with Tequila by Button Down Brass because I couldn't even find it to listen to. What the fuck's the point of music you can't even manage listening to? You know, like I searched YouTube and Spotify and Amazon. I thought about going to look on iTunes even, you know, and I don't ever do that anymore.
Yep.
So I couldn't hear the song. It may be a great song, but since I couldn't even fucking listen to it, you're definitely my bottom track.
This is a decent variety of different genres for me, but I will say the downside to it, it has way too many tracks and way too many instrumentals. A lot of the time, there were songs in between that were just instrumentals, and I will say I wasn't aware of that when I'm making my selection, because you don't pay attention to stuff like that when you're watching the film. Other things that the soundtrack has to offer is songs by Queen, a lot of new different artists that I had never heard of before. There's Beck is on the soundtrack. Simon and Garfunkel, tons of different genres and types of musicians make this, and I just really enjoyed the songs that were chosen, but not the instrumentals. The instrumentals, they were just too long, and there were too many of them.
Well, this is another double disc. Mm-hmm. So technically, you gave me 5 discs to listen to this week.
I did, and I even said we can get rid of the Baby Driver, but you're like, nah.
No, what you did was you questioned me about my pick.
I did. I offered to take mine away.
Why are you a dick that's giving me a double disc when I gave you 2 double discs?
I said if we take away yours, we'll take away mine. And you're like, no.
Just kidding. This is a pretty eclectic soundtrack with groovy funk acting as its primary adhesive. The problem for me here was, as Raven already mentioned, a high number of instrumentals that were only momentarily interesting. You can put them in a film and they're going to feel great, but if you try listening to it on its own, it just doesn't play. You're apt to recognize lots of tracks from later samples in the music genre. Great for a memorable soundtrack, but not for a solo listening experience. Should have been 1 disc. Mm-hmm. If you want to hear Guardian's flair meet Tarantino's style, this is for you. I just found
me in a nutshell.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I found it to be a little boring in places. It's like,
which is me in a nutshell.
Elevator music at a party. Yeah. Like it's a party, but you're still listening to elevator music. You know.
What I didn't tell you is this was all a ploy to get you to somehow listen to that song by the Emeralds.
Oh, well.
I recommended that song a couple episodes back, and I took it straight from this soundtrack. So if you didn't listen to my recommendation from the past episode, Shane, haha, gotcha, bitch.
You got me.
Because now you have.
Which I think, if memory serves correctly, I wound up giving that song a 5.
Okay. So it's a good one. It's a really good one. I really enjoyed it. They also are using it for like the Jim Beam commercial song now. I think it's Jim Beam. Anyway, I'm rambling.
Give the context you asked for earlier. Baby Driver is the film I haven't seen from your 3. And it was 30 tracks. 11 of those got 5. So roughly 1/3 was a 5 for me. Mm-hmm. Valley Girl was almost everything. Guardians was pretty close to everything. Mm-hmm. Got 5s. I mean, you scored really well here. So
thank you. I appreciate you telling me that.
Baby Driver was only weak because it had a lot of material. So
yeah, and I wish I'm not saying that I wish I would have selected something differently, but in a way I do. I think I probably would have had a better choice going with The Wedding Singer, which is what I kind of teetered with. I went back and forth with Baby Driver and The Wedding Singer, but I thought since we were having the 80s representation with Valley Girl that I needed to go with something a little different.
Did you know that I think the producer was in contact with the person who was doing Guardians before Guardians 2 came out? They contacted him about the soundtrack just to make sure that none of the songs they were using in Baby Driver were also being used in Guardians 2.
No, I did not know that, but it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it is what it is. Are we ready to move on to like a break or something? Did we get a break?
Let's take our break.
All right. Shane.
That's my name.
Do you have a question for me that you would like to ask?
Oh, that's what we do here.
That is what we do here. That makes me feel like you were not prepared at all.
Well, what you told me before we started recording was you had a bunch of questions from people.
I do, but if you remember in past specials, we use this time to ask each other a question as well.
This is correct. Did you have a question for me?
I actually had a couple,
Okay.
but I was going to choose my question based off of your question.
What the fuck? Okay. Let's think here.
I have a couple of different directions of questions that I thought about. Because I asked something music related and you hit me with what type of perfume do you wear?
Yeah, okay. Well, let's just ask a question on the fly.
All right.
Have you ever thought that you might be a narcissist? And if you've thought that, what have you tried to do differently to maybe change that view?
Yes, I have thought that I'm a little bit of a narcissist. Just a little, though. I really dislike it when people continuously talk about themselves or use someone else's experience and story to piggyback and let people know what they have done or what they have done better. I absolutely hate that. And if I ever do that, please, please, please tell me, because I hate that shit. What I do to ensure that I do not act that way is I continuously try to put myself in someone else's shoes, kind of treat others the way that I would want to be treated, sort of thing. But I have often had the thought of, am I being too narcissistic right now? And that's usually when I try to take a step back and either shut the fuck up or do something else differently. So if I ever come across that way, I encourage people to tell me, because I am definitely one of those people that can take constructive criticism and won't get offended. So please say something to my stupid ass. You?
Do what?
You?
What about me?
I'm wanting to know, you answer your own question.
Yeah, I think after losing the weight and starting to feel a lot better about myself, like the world actually saw what I wanted them to see, I think I did feel pretty big-headed at times. And what I just tried to act more in accordance with the way that I had always acted, which is like, I'm not the center of the world, because I've never thought that I am. I think sometimes the things that I do with my life make me seem narcissistic. You talk about yourself in the third person because I'm using my name as like a branding thing for my books, and it just, I hate it so much.
Is that why you go by other pseudonyms?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
And it's just, I don't like the way that it leaves me feeling, but at the same time, you have to promote yourself. And I am really trying to make a life out of writing and doing these shows. And it's because it's what I love. It's because it's fun. It's not because I'm full of myself. If you're really around me and know me, I don't think extremely highly of myself. I just don't.
People also tend to forget and confuse being your own personal cheerleader as narcissism. We live in a world where there's not a lot of people pushing you to be better or do better. If you're part of the lucky few that has a circle of people that are going to be your biggest cheerleaders, you are extremely lucky. But you have to remember, at the end of the day, you have to be there to pick yourself up.
Yeah.
So don't confuse that with narcissism. If someone's being a dick about it, then yeah, go ahead, tell them. That's what I'm saying is, don't confuse my confidence for narcissism.
And I definitely know some people who've got narcissistic tendencies, but at the same time, they are some of my biggest proponents. Mm-hmm. And I've always tried to think about that. Like they might talk about themselves to, a degree that's unhealthy, or maybe they're not making it a point to interject other people into the conversation. It's just, but those people have great qualities and they do care about others. And I don't know. I think for me, it always came back to if somebody is actively trying to hurt other people, if they mean harm, or if they're entertained by other people's misery, then that always seemed like if you have no awareness for how you're hurting other people, or you just don't care, that's problematic. So normally when someone says something like, hey, you're coming across as a narcissist, that's part of my immediate thought is, who am I hurting? How am I doing it? Is there
Yeah.
validity to it? And
Yeah.
whatever.
You know, I get you. But I have a question.
Yeah.
A lighter question. All right, Shane, ignore my squeaky chair. It's 1:00 in the morning. It's obviously very late. You're hungry. You go to the kitchen. You decide to make yourself a sandwich. What sandwich do you make yourself?
And that depends on what's in the kitchen.
What do you find yourself wanting at 1 a.m. as far as a sandwich?
Oh, motherfucker. Okay. Why is this question so hard? Let's say the most common sandwich that I eat is a grilled sourdough sandwich that's got turkey, mayo, maybe lettuce or bacon on it.
Okay. All right. That sounds tasty.
You would also you put a little bit of salt and garlic powder on the bread when you're grilling it.
See, dude, you already doing too much for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm back on keto, so I'm not eating any bread. But if I was eating bread, I would do bread and you could be a classic. I prefer like the butter bread. That shredded mozzarella cheese, turkey. You heat it up in the microwave and then you add pickles to it.
That sounds good.
That is my sandwich. Since I was a preteen, that has been my sandwich of choice. Some people make fun of me because of how simple it is. I love it, and it's got to be a hot sandwich. I've
never thought to melt mozzarella in the microwave. But
you ain't living. Seriously.
I can normally hold off long enough to bake it and get it brown on the top.
Nope, I don't have the patience.
I mean, that's
Gotta
cool.
have that shit. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It is a hot, there's no crispiness to it. It's a soggy ass sandwich. I just love it. Maybe it's nostalgia purposes, but it's quick, it's easy, and it's exactly what I want.
By the way, if I was going to put cheese on my sandwich, I would probably put Swiss on it. But I think that wouldn't work in the microwave. I think mozzarella would work in the microwave, as you're clearly saying.
I'm the mozzarella expert. If you've seen me, I will be the first to tell you my body was made by mozzarella, and I'm not necessarily thankful, but...
Oh my God. All right. So my understanding is you have some questions from people.
I do. I have some questions from our listeners. We posted on our Facebook for listeners to interact on what questions they would like to ask us on the podcast. And we got a couple of responses. So I don't know if we want to choose to let them remain anonymous. I might just let them remain anonymous. But one of the questions that we got was, what 3 bands would you like to attend a festival to see?
Why don't you go ahead, since I know you've had time to think about some of these things?
Not enough time. This was actually the question that was probably the hardest for me to wrap my head around, because like, do I go with an overall vibe of similar sounding artists? Like, do I go with Fleetwood Mac and stick to that 70s rock sound, 70s folk sound?
Well,
I don't know.
That's the beauty here, right? Is you can pick anything you want.
Oh, okay. You know what? Off the top of my head. Here we go. Top of my head. Panic at the Disco, again. The Weeknd, and Bruno Mars.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to go with people I haven't seen before, but I would want to. They don't have to make sense together. It would just be pleasing to me. Still on my life list is Lamb of God, ICP, and then let me throw out something in the way of outlandish shit here.
Timmy T.
No. I think what would be really fun, I don't even know if it's possible, I don't know if some of them have died, but Dr. Hook. So the strangest concert you ever been to in your life, Insane Clown Posse, Lamb of God, which is a metal band, and then Dr. Hook, which is a 70s rock band. Yeah.
Hey, there are no rules here. No rules.
It sounds like a fucking fever dream or something.
Name 4 people you would want to make up your super band.
Like people you know, or just any people?
No, any musician. You're creating a super band. You have to pick 4. I don't know why this person said 4 and not 5 or 3, but they said 4. So to give them exactly what they want, we're going to go with 4. 4 musicians to make up your super band.
All right. You go ahead.
I would like Ann Wilson as a female vocalist, Freddie Mercury as a male vocalist, Eddie Van Halen on lead guitar, and Flea for a bassist.
Okay. So no drums and no keys.
I only could pick 4. I don't know why I went with the second vocalist, but I don't know why. I had said that in the past.
I think it's kind of telling that the person asked about 4 people, and it does make you, typically you would expect 5. So this this is kind of narrowing in a way that I like because you picked 2 vocalists. I would never have even thought to do that. So David Gilmour from Pink Floyd for guitar. That's obvious.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to go John Mayung from Dream Theater for bass. Motherfucker.
I know, dude. It's hard. And I'm still questioning the people that I chose because I got these questions last night.
Brutal.
I know.
Two of us from Nightwish on keys. And man, drums are such unfamiliar territory for me. So that's really rough.
Go with the keyboardist. Go with, what's her face from Fleetwood Mac you love so much?
I'm going to assume that drums would be filled in nicely by these people. And if I'm looking for a vocalist that's going to make sense with the rest of what's happening here in this weird band that I'm creating, let's say the lead singer of Dia's Veil, whose name I do not know.
Okay.
One of the most interesting voices.
All right. Next question. Do you ever see Rated Radio going to a YouTube platform?
I'll let you answer.
We have talked about it in the past. There will be, I hope at some point we will be able to merge YouTube and the audio and video of the podcast. Until then, though, there are other places that you can find us on YouTube eventually. Shane does have another show called Banter Bar that I will be making appearances on until we are able to figure out the audio visual syncing of our own podcast, because I know there's a way that we can record the podcast on YouTube and then take the audio without it being too screwed up and post it to Spotify. We just not have gotten around to fiddling with that yet. Shane, would you agree that hopefully that's the direction that we would be going in eventually?
Well, let's say I can edit video. I don't enjoy editing video. The editing of the audio for the show is already more of an investment than I like it to be sometimes, even now that I've gotten it down to an art, a science. So unless Rayburn figures out how to edit video and is willing to set everything up, move all the gear, all that stuff, I don't know that it would happen, but we're recording on computers right now. I could definitely see using webcams or something.
Yeah.
Doing this at a distance, or even just continuing to use the computers in the same room and setting it up that way. I could see a way that it would happen. I just don't know how it would be edited, for one. And I don't know if it would be as interesting as people think it would be. We spend a lot of time looking at sheets of paper and reading things from these sheets of paper. The interaction is not as lively, I think, as people might hope. So I don't know that it translates. We are a podcast for a reason, but I think a time and a place for sure. And I would definitely like to get to a spot where we did specials that are video only, things that are video centric.
I think the one thing that Shane and I both can agree on is we will never rule out the possibility of that happening.
No.
So I think that's the best answer for that question, whether or not either one of us has the time. I mean, Shane's about to have a second kid. I just started a new job. I mean, a lot of things are up in the air at this point. But one thing that we can always say that we agree on is we never rule out the possibility of doing something like that.
Agreed.
What is your favorite game to currently play?
Video game, board game? What are we talking?
Any we'll go with video game, but I mean, I don't think we've played a bunch of board games here lately.
Right now I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima. It's been a lot of fun. I'll get the platinum on that and probably be done with it. Although I think there are some things that I can play with people now. Free DLC that came with the game. That's pretty cool. I want to play something like Destiny 2 with people again, but we haven't been very social as far as gaming goes. So unless we set up a video game night that's dedicated and with the new baby, I don't see much of any of that happening.
Yeah.
You?
I have been playing a game called We Happy Few. I've been trying to find a game that closely relates to the look and feel of the BioShock trilogy. And I found We Happy Few. The look of it is very, very similar, mainly BioShock Infinite. So I've been playing that by myself, but Blue and I have also been working on platinuming Lego Marvel Superheroes 2. So we've been doing that as well. So that is what I'm currently playing right now.
I got a game for you, but it's going to have to wait till another week since my plug is being pushed back. I really do have a game that I think you specifically will enjoy.
Okay.
We'll talk about it.
All right. What is your favorite band to listen to while you clean?
Air Supply. Judge me all you want. I don't care. Actually, I mentioned at some point somewhere that I dated, or not that I dated, I went on a few dates with Code's cousin.
Mm-hmm.
She worked at Hastings back in the day.
Throwback.
She was in the music section almost exclusively. And I used to do a lot of special orders and stuff, Blind Guardian and even Nightwish and all that sort of thing. But at one point, I did go in and was trying to special order Air Supply albums. And she thought that was fucking hilarious. Like, lost all credibility.
Aww.
I mean, she still went out with me. Anyway, what about you?
I usually try to stick to playlists that I have put together myself for whatever mood I'm in. If you've listened in past episodes, you'll know that about me. But if I have to settle on one artist to press play and just do my thing around the house, it probably is Panic at the Disco, only because I am very familiar with a lot of their discography and I enjoy listening to them. So, but most of the time, I will, literally 9 times out of 10, I will choose a pre-made playlist that I have put together myself. If you had to bring back one dead musician, who would it be?
You go ahead.
Freddie Mercury.
I would think most likely a toss-up between, obviously, Jeff Buckley, but the other one that I think would have done so much is Jim Croce.
Oh, my heart. That's a good one. That's a good one, Shane. I ultimately chose Freddie Mercury because I believe he died in 92, either 91 or 92. So I pretty much didn't get to live in a world where Freddie Mercury existed. And he was just such a powerhouse of talent that I wish it was something that I would have gotten to watch him grow and make more music during my lifetime. And I will never be able to say that I did that. I could have easily said Prince, David Bowie. There are other artists that I actually got to experience. Freddie Mercury, I never got to experience. And that's something that will forever bum me out. Yeah.
At least all of those artists left a fucking shit ton of music to be listened to.
That is true. So. That is very, very true. But that was our last question that we got from our listeners. I want to take the time to thank everyone for asking those questions. They were good ones and definitely got Shane and I thinking. So thank you guys for your participation. And if you have any other questions that you would like to ask us in any future episode or the next special, feel free to comment on any one of our social media platforms. We love getting questions from you guys, and anything we can do to make your listening experience better, we will do it.
Yeah, and if you want us to name you, just let us know. It doesn't make you sound full of yourself. It's always cool to feel connected, and I think you do feel more connected when someone uses your name. We just don't know if you want us to do that. So
anyway, you ready to move on to our
my
next
picks?
Yeah, to your picks.
I think I'm ready.
I know you're ready. All right, let's get it rolling. Partner.
Yes, let's.
What was your first soundtrack album that you picked?
American Graffiti from 1973. Before we get too into this, I haven't seen American Graffiti.
Get the fuck out of here.
Nope.
Are you kidding?
Haven't seen it. I've been watching for a sale. I refuse to buy something that I've never seen, and it doesn't stream anywhere.
Okay, well, I might be incriminating my father, but he owns a Fire Stick that may or may not have been tampered with.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to watch 2 of your picks that I had never seen before. American Graffiti I knew of very well, but I had never sat down to actually watch it. This past week I did. But as many times as you have stated you love the American Graffiti soundtrack, I assumed you had seen it multiple times.
Well, the thing about it is it hasn't really been too pressing for me either. Every time someone mentions American Graffiti, all they've ever talked to me about is the soundtrack, not the film itself. And the soundtrack mirrors a lot of other films that I really enjoy, like Diner. Mm-hmm. There's so many similarities. Anyway, this was my top pick.
This was my middle pick.
I gave it 14 5s.
I gave it 8 5s.
My top track was Smoke Gets in Your Eyes.
My top track was I Only Have Eyes for You by the Flamingos.
Bottom track was That'll Be the Day.
Because
of the overdubbed intro.
My bottom track was All Summer Long by the Beach Boys, but I am going to say one of the things that I could definitely do without on the soundtrack album is the participation of Wolfman Jack.
Yep.
You really do not need him on the soundtrack.
No, you don't, which is why I'm sure both of us would agree in finding the playlist, the actual soundtrack playlist on Spotify so that you're not getting those Wolfman Jack pieces.
Yes. It's very fitting to the setting of the movie. This is exactly what you would think a 1950s teen movie would include. It's the classic greatest hits of the 50s. If you don't enjoy doo-wop music, this is not for you.
Yeah, I said it's an amalgamation of oldies tracks, most of which you'll know as standouts from other films. And this Selections album, it ain't even half of the music that's in the film. This disc is not perfection, but it could turn folks onto oldies. So if you don't know much in the way of oldies and you always kind of wondered or wanted to get into, this is a great place to start, is with the Selections from American Graffiti album.
Yeah. Like Shane said, what we originally were looking at was actually a double disc album. There are tons more tracks from this movie that are offered on that double disc album. So there could be more that the album has to offer than what we rated here today.
So anyway,
moving on to the next album.
Yeah, which, just for clarification, American Graffiti had 20 tracks on a single disc. So when I say top pick, I mean there's a lot of good music there. It didn't get as many fives as some other things, but the purchase value was higher, so it's my number one. Rambling. Empire Records from 1995 was my next pick. This was actually my bottom album.
This is my bottom album as well.
I gave it 15 fives.
Almost perfect rating.
No, that's a perfect rating.
There were 16.
There were 15. Amazon, Google, it all says 15. It ends with the Sugar High song. There is an additional track, I guess, that I didn't know about, so I can listen to it and get back to you, but I'm at 15 for a perfect rating for this album. Yeah.
I gave 4 5s.
Damn. My top track was Nice Overalls.
My top track was Free by the Martinis.
Bottom track was Circle of Friends.
My bottom track was Liar by the Cranberries.
Ooh.
I know.
That's tough.
I know.
Circle of Friends, I initially thought was a 4, and the more I listened to it, the more I wanted to hear it. So almost wasn't a perfect rating.
I had high hopes from the Cranberries because I love the Cranberries.
Mm-hmm.
But this was not one that I enjoyed. I gave it a 2. But in regards to this album, it's straight up 90s alternative for me. Alternative and punk. Chock full of teen angst tracks. Contains emotional tracks. And the reason why I didn't give it so many 5s is it started out off strong, but then it began to trail off as it got to the end of the soundtrack album.
Which, cool. If you... I don't really know what to say about it.
Love the engagement.
I mean, I'm still thinking a lot of things. Clearly, this didn't trail off for me. I thought it potentially had one weak moment at about the center of the soundtrack, but ultimately it's all 5s for me. There was more music in the movie, quite a bit more. It just didn't make it onto the soundtrack. Most of that's really great too. If you're going to make a movie about a record store, the soundtrack better be this goddamn good. No part of this masterpiece fails to remind me of the personalities I was steeped in through my younger days. If you ever want to experience the energy of the household I grew up in, give this film and its soundtrack a go. Me, my sisters, Joseph, Joel, Jennifer, Corey, we're all there.
Now I'm trying to associate who with which characters, but that's
the mystery
for me to think later.
If you like Empire Records' The Ballad of El Goodo, if you like that song, check out the Counting Crows version. I think it's superior, but I still clearly love the original.
Cool.
Yeah. That's Empire Records, which is the other film that I went to watch after I listened to the soundtrack. So Valley Girl and Empire Records, that was my week.
That's a good week. I love that. I love that movie too. I own it, and yeah, it's the characters in it are great. The music is good. It's a fun, interesting story of all these different types of people somehow making it work in one work environment. So
yeah, what's great about it is I didn't initially. You can watch the movie and know that you like some of the music, It feels very indie. Like more, if you've ever been in love with like a single and you've had a B-side on that single and you end up really loving the B-side, even though nobody means for you to, it's kind of how I feel about all of this. Like almost none of it was meant to be that number one hit single, but it all just works so well together. Anyway, enough about my hard on for Empire Records. My final pick is from the third movie that I've not seen, always knew about soundtrack though. It's Waiting to Exhale from 1995. This was my middle pick.
This was my top pick.
I gave it 15 fives. So again, one away from a perfect rating.
I gave it 6 fives.
Top track was Count on Me.
Top track, It Hurts Like Hell by Aretha Franklin.
Bottom track was All Night Long. I thought the chorus was a little flat, but it's so close to a 5. Pisses me off.
My bottom track was And I Gave My Love to You by Sonja Marie. It's elevator music.
Okay. That's one interpretation for sure.
I didn't like it. This was a movie that I had never seen either. I have since watched it this past week. The only thing I ever knew about this movie is that classic scene where Angela Bassett goes and burns all of her husband's shit and catches his car on fire and walks away like a boss. This movie's good. Blue knew this movie because his sister Samantha was obsessed with it when she was younger, so he knew it very well. But I asked him to give me a brief synopsis of what I was to expect, and he said, think Tyler Perry movie, but in the 90s. Anybody that is anybody of the African-American community is in this movie. And it did not disappoint.
I definitely intend to check it out. I could say that.
It's good.
I didn't realize the soundtrack was as good as it is.
Well, all the songs were written by Babyface.
Yeah. All but one written and produced. And what's funny is when I was listening, I kind of had that feel. Like you realize it's cohesive and then you're like, I know this is all female artists, but this sounds so much like Babyface music.
Yep.
And sure as shit.
And some of those female artists that were included was obviously Whitney Houston because she is in the movie. You have TLC. You have Aretha Franklin. You have, what are some other ones, Shane?
SWV. Patti LaBelle. I mean, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Shaka Khan. It's, my God.
Yep.
It is a fucking powerhouse.
I said this album consists of slow 90s R&B tracks. Either makes me want to get freaky or mourn the loss of a lover. So either way, I'm yearning. Yearning and female empowerment would be the way that I describe this album. In the end of this movie, the message is no matter what you're going through, you have the capability to lean on your friends. And at the end of the day, if you have that, that's all you really need. So it was a really, really good message that tells the story of these 4 different women dealing with these 4 completely different situations, but still find a way to carry each other throughout these situations in the movie.
I wrote that this album may be one of the best examples of thematic consistency there's ever been. This is 90s feminine R&B, jazz, and soul with tinges of dark heartache, loyalty, and eroticism. This is a desert island disc. Do not let another day go by without discovering the deep well this thing has to offer. I think if you don't love it immediately, you'll listen again and again, and it's going to get its roots in you in a big way. I wanted to mention that my top song, Count on Me, could easily have gone with pretty much anything else on the disc. It's that fucking good. But I picked Count on Me because it reminds me, I shared recently, I think, a story about getting to sing a song that I really love with a girl that I was kind of crazy for because of our choir entanglements. And we had another one of those moments with this song at Friday Night Live when they did play slow songs. People would dance, slow dance with each other and stuff. That wasn't always something that my crowd was big on. And I just remember she and I just sang this back and forth back when I was young enough to actually hit notes like this, Yeah, it's a really good memory for me. And there were a lot of other good friends around us at the time. It's, I don't know, something I harken back to. We listened to music like this back then, even though we hadn't been through these major love struggles. Yeah. But yeah, that is my 3 picks. 2 films I hadn't seen. Question, because we have to go here.
Uh-huh.
So who won for you?
Okay, for clarification purposes, going based off of average only, your picks took it.
Okay.
But if we're taking into account the number of fives, it got 10 more fives from my picks from me. But if we're only going based off of average only, which is something that I consistently do, your picks took it for this week.
Okay.
What about you?
Well, it was closer than I would expect, but it's only closer until I account for 5 discs instead of 3 discs on your end. Your average is just a little bit lower. Our fives were exactly the same until I scaled them down because of the 5 discs. And purchase value was within $6 of one another. And you're talking like $50 or so. So these were great picks all around. I think you could have taken the win here if not for maybe that first disc of Baby Driver.
Yeah.
This was a lot of good stuff. Again, I would have compacted Baby Driver some, and Guardians feels like a peek into a much larger world, and you don't really see the much larger world. Mm-hmm. Like if there was a double disc among what you gave me, like I would have preferred it be Guardians, not Baby Driver.
Driver.
But you can't, just make those magically go together. I get that completely. So
yeah. All right. Well, I don't disagree with that. I was a little disappointed for Baby Driver than I thought I was going to be. So I'll take that.
Yeah. What's sad is I really want 3 of these soundtracks to be perfect ratings. I'm finally feeling what you felt with Prince, I think. Mm-hmm. But I really want Valley Girl and Waiting to Exhale to be right up there. Unfortunately, the only one that did it was Empire. So it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Shall we get to the second half of our list?
Hell yeah. You want me to go first?
Works for me.
All right. Going first for me is Moving in Stereo by the Cars from the Fast Times at Ridgemont High soundtrack. At this part in the movie, this soundtrack is great, but I had to go with this because not only is it my favorite Cars song currently, but it comes at such a pivotal, memorable point in the movie. And if you know what I'm talking about, yeah.
My next pick is Feel the Funk by Immature from the Dangerous Minds soundtrack. And the Dangerous Minds soundtrack is pretty slept on, but very solid. Sadly, I've got this song linked to one of the strangest dates of my life. So hold on. You love this sort of story, right?
Yeah, yes, I do.
I agreed to a double date with a friend's younger sister. We wound up at Chili's, and the date was a lot of fun. I mean, we were having a good time. My date was gorgeous. I had never seen her before that. And my homegirl's boyfriend, who I'd never met before then, wound up being easy to cut up with. So again, we were having a good time. We'd all ridden together in the boyfriend's truck, and when we left, I thought we were headed back to the girl's house, but we ended up at a shrink's office.
What?
Yeah, that's right. I once went on a date, which consisted of my date visiting her psychiatrist midway through. I literally sat in the floor of this place playing around with a stranger's toddler because the kid was crying a lot and no one else, not even the mother, wanted to show him any attention.
Oh my God.
To make matters worse, it was clearly taboo to even address what was going on. I remember wanting to jet but not being able to because we weren't in my hometown and I hadn't taken my own car. Later on, we wound up in their swimming pool. When I finally asked my date why she decided to start seeing a shrink, she told me it wasn't by choice, that she was just a nutcase. She told it like a joke, but I'm honestly still not sure if she was joking. And yeah, this song came on in the truck after we left the restaurant. That's the story.
It amazes me how you get yourself in some of these situations.
That one was blindsided.
Well, I know you didn't really have anything to do with that, but your luck is astounding when it comes to things like that.
I think a lot of people go through this stuff if you just are out there. The world is a weird, unpredictable place. That's why most of us decide to not stay single.
Next on my list is Playground Love by Air featuring Gordon Trax. This is from the Virgin Suicide soundtrack. A lot of people don't know that this movie exists, but it's actually based off of my favorite book. It's just a good jam, and I say it's a jam. It's not really a jam as jammy jams per se, but it's definitely a good track. What's your next pick?
Life is But a Dream by the Harp Tones from Goodfellas. Goodfellas is one of my favorite films, and part of that is owed to its memorable soundtrack. Whether it's being a child coerced into committing crimes, getting treated like royalty when you go out to certain places, or being married to a strong, stubborn woman, I can relate to a lot of what's going on here. One thing I never wanted to relate to, though, was the fairly stuffy wedding reception scene in the film, the part where this song is played. The notion of sitting around like king and queen while people handed us envelopes full of money defeated the purpose for me. I think for Megan, too. We tried making our ceremony more about the people who were there, providing free drinks, catered food, no dress code, the ability to request songs played throughout the night. I spent days cutting clips from the songs we'd chosen and ordering them to match our vision for the evening. This song, of course, was in that set.
I don't remember that. I was too busy drinking and eating the free food and not wearing shoes, so.
Well, that's the thing. We had so much music, there was no way it was all going to be played, so...
No, that happens.
You can't just play a song from the beginning, something like that. You know, it just doesn't work. You have to like find these specific pieces of the songs, and I had to do that with lots of songs. So
yeah, that's the blessing and the curse of having your life be so heavily involved with music and your music taste is you can't just let somebody else take control in moments like that, because I immediately think of how nutso I'm going to be when it comes to creating playlists and setting the mood for my own wedding or reception. So
yeah, I genuinely think it's the least amount of fun that Joel's ever had DJing, because he had to hit stop once and play once, you know. I mean, there's nothing to it.
Yep.
What's next?
Next on my list is A Man of Constant Sorrow by the Soggy Bottom Boys, or Dan Tyminski. That's how you pronounce it. From the Oh Brother Where Art Thou soundtrack. This soundtrack, if you don't like old-timey music, old-timey Southern music especially, some of it religiously influenced, you're not going to enjoy this soundtrack. The reason why it makes this list is it takes me back to a lot of people that surrounded my life growing up and watching this movie pretty consistently while growing up. So that's the reason why it makes this list. I could have easily chosen any number of songs that I really enjoy from this soundtrack, but I decided to go with the main well-known track just because it's too good not to mention.
Yep, very bluegrass, very fun. And yeah, it's another one of those that's on my wall in here.
Yep.
So
next for you?
My next pick is Kissing You by Des'ree from Romeo and Juliet. I first saw Romeo and Juliet in a small basement classroom in the 7th grade. Of all the films we watched, this one struck the deepest chord with me. I remember not even understanding most of what was being said, wound up reading the play until I did understand it. Everything about the film felt familiar to things I was used to feeling in life, with one exception, the scene where this track's played, and Romeo falls for Juliet. So ultimately that became my measure, and I still think about the high level of disbelief I continued feeling when that lightning bolt moment of love finally hit me. I'd been listening to friends and family talk about this girl for weeks before I actually got to meet her, and it was like all the air and movement in my hourglass suddenly ceased existing. I spent the next year and a half walking every extra pound off of myself, feeling like I was walking my way into her arms, and that's exactly what happened. So, while we existed without the intrusion of our silently feuding families, what we had felt exactly the way I feel when watching this scene in Baz Luhrmann's film.
That movie is gorgeous.
Yep.
The use of color, the use of music, just the whole Baz Luhrmann's overall styling when it comes to his movies is incredible. And I think while I love Moulin Rouge and he did Gatsby, I still think that Romeo and Juliet is my absolute favorite.
He's got another one out that I want to see.
The ballroom one?
No, I remember not liking Strictly Ballroom.
What was that? He has another one.
Is Australia?
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Hugh Jackman and Nicole Kidman.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one either. But but there are 3 that are styled the same kind of as Romeo and Juliet and Moulin Rouge. But I can't think of the third one. Anyway.
I just know it was very weird. The family dynamics, the friendships, the feuding, like all of that felt so familiar to what was going on in my life. So that was one of my favorite movies, even before I could relate to the love section of it. You know, and then it just made it even better. I love that film.
It's really good. It's long. It's a long movie. Isn't it like
Yeah.
a 2-hour something movie?
I don't remember how long it is.
I always enjoyed that it took the words and sort of modernized the look of it. So instead of swords, they had the guns. It makes understanding what they're saying so much easier because the acting is so good in it.
Yep. And I know it's a tragedy and people try to say it's the greatest love story of all time, and you're perfectly able to disagree. I get that. It's a statement on young love and how families get it wrong when they try to control. One thing I really liked about what Shakespeare did with that story, though, is the losses of the friends or the family members. You feel that just as intensely as you do the loss of, the romantic relationship as well. It's brilliantly done. Anyway, what's your next pick?
My next pick is Heaven is a Place on Earth by Belinda Carlisle from Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion. This takes me back to fond memories spent with your youngest sister, often deciding who would be which character from this movie. Not only is this movie fun and, colorful, but the soundtrack offers a lot of bops, as the youngins would say. And it always takes me back to time spent with your youngest sister and how many shenanigans we could get ourselves into when people weren't looking.
Y'all definitely found some winners to get obsessed with back in the day.
You leave us alone.
Fucking this and Night at the Roxbury and Superstar and oh man.
Do not judge us. We were just out to have a good time.
What's funny is I tried to jump on the train with everyone at one point just to, I guess, feel like, hey, I can do this too. And my thing was Rubberface, that early Jim Carrey film. It's so bad.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but no one ever wanted to watch that shit. So I'm just an outsider.
Sure you are, Shane. Unfortunately, I think you fit right in with the rest of us.
Yeah.
What's your is it your last pick or second to last?
It's second to last.
Okay, second to last.
It's She's Like the Wind by Patrick Swayze from Dirty Dancing. Not only did Swayze take part in writing this song, but it was actually rejected for inclusion in a few films before finding its way into Dirty Dancing. If nothing else, let that be a lesson to people who take a few instances of rejection as proof that the world doesn't need or want what you're offering. People have warned me against or actively tried dismantling every last dream I've ever chased. But you know what those people have never done? They've never recorded a song, or published a novel, or started a podcast, or put their faces on YouTube, or signed a book deal. I've done those things, and think you should do your things too. Support is rarely found in the predictable circles in which we exist. It's easy to believe folks don't want you to succeed, but it may just be that they don't want you facing failure later down the line after you've already invested a bunch of yourself in something that ultimately fails. From my perspective, though, failure is instructive. So lean into it. If a dream had no value, you wouldn't be dreaming it in the first place. Swayze could have left the world without this song if he'd only let rejection guide his sense of self-worth. He didn't do that. Now the world has this song and is a better place for it. So, yeah.
People don't often realize that when they hinder you from doing things, they're in their eyes, they're trying to protect you from future heartaches and failure later, but they don't realize that they're hindering you to not ever seek the highest level of satisfaction.
Yeah.
And yeah, I get that.
You got to try for your bliss, or what's the point, you know?
Yeah.
What's your last pick?
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Fuck me. That's fine. One thing that I was going to say is...
You're my cousin, favorite. I'm not going to fuck you.
You mentioned 2 soundtracks that were going to make my list, but ultimately, since you sent me a copy of your list first to make sure that, not to make sure that we didn't have duplicates, but just so that I was aware.
Right.
It would have been Dirty Dancing and Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
So the fact that I did not get to include Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet is exactly why I featured Baz Luhrmann's The Great Gatsby. The track is Love is Blindness by Jack White from the White Stripes. This soundtrack, like Luhrmann's other soundtracks, is a variety of different styles and music genres. You have everybody from... It leans more into the 1920s, like big band sound. I think it's 1920s or horns, anyway, whatever. But it also has a lot of modern like rap influences. Jay-Z did a lot of stuff, Andre 3000, Beyonce, but Lana Del Rey is also featured on this soundtrack. Jack White from the White Stripes is featured on this soundtrack. And I know they're not as popular anymore, but the Black Eyed Peas, Fergie. It's just a lot of different artists coming together to create a really good feel for the representation of the movie. So, Love is Blindness by Jack White.
I love Leo, so you're not going to get any arguments
That's another
from
thing
me.
that we don't disagree on. But that is the end of my list.
Okay. Well, to end mine is the song Let Go by Frou Frou from the Garden State soundtrack. This is another one I still haven't seen, even though I've known for a solid 15 years now that its soundtrack is killer. Anyone who looks at the track list will recognize a handful of songs that I've mentioned on numerous occasions during this podcast. This disc was a favorite of one of my exes. Sort of ironic that the Let Go track is what reminds me most of finally moving on from that relationship. I think that even after meeting the girl who'd eventually become my wife, I still had it in my head somewhere that the ex and I weren't done with each other. It took running into said ex at a bar with Megan and our friends for me to realize that I was happy for the way things were. Didn't need them to go back to what they'd previously been. At some point, after the ex had left the bar, this started playing on the overhead speakers. The lyrics felt like a message, a second round of sobering recognition. That part of my life was over, but life itself wasn't over, not even close. And that's my list.
Yeah, it's sometimes people feel that they often have this idea of what situations would be like in their head, but when actually faced with the opportunity of said situation, they realize that it's not all it's cracked up to be. So.
Exactly.
I don't know why I said that. Just fucking ignore me.
Hey, we're deep into this for 4 hours now, so it's to be expected that we just talk to talk.
Oh.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a special I want people to enjoy and get their money's worth, and I think we've done a pretty decent job of providing something of value here.
You sound so confident.
Well, I mean, if nothing else, people might walk away from this and have some new movies to watch, and a lot of them are streaming for free, so.
That is very, very true. And with quarantine and everything happening and nobody doing shit else anyway, yeah, watching some movies is definitely something that we all can get behind right
Most
now.
definitely. I think we could do another one of these at some point in time, and there'd still be plenty of soundtracks to choose from.
Yeah, we probably wouldn't even have to touch on any of the ones that were even mentioned here and still be just fine.
Yep.
So anyway, if there's nothing left that you want to say, I say we end this special.
Yeah. If you're hearing it, thank you for buying it. We will try to make another one before too much longer. But I'm about to have a brand new baby in the house, so, hold tight.
Yeah, don't spread Shane too thin. But anyway.
I'm not butter.
Okay, you fucking weirdo. All right, well, that's going to do it for this week. Hit up our playlist to hear all the songs we talk about. Get our full ratings, t-shirts, and bonus episodes at teespring.com/ratedradio. And guide what we listen to by suggesting new artists for our jam jar. You can even send us voice messages on Facebook for a shot at being on the show. And remember, your support is really what makes or breaks us. So thank you for listening and sharing. And until next time, fill your world with music.
Don't be afraid to make sure your soundtrack is something you really love listening to.